Welcome back to Missing. I am Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. Thanks so much for asking. I hope all the listeners out there are doing just as fantastic. And what's going to make this episode, what's going to improve everyone's mood is having the delightful, buttery tones of an old friend. He's not old in age, he's old in the amount of time that we've known him. He's coming back on to discuss this really, really tragic story that's happening in his area in the world. But Tim, what's happening in this area of my line of questioning is, how are you today?
Doing all right over here. Thanks a lot for asking. And yes, very excited to introduce this conversation with old friend Jordan Bonaparte of the Nighttime Podcast. And he's got a great podcast. You can find out everything he's doing at nighttimepodcast.com. And Lance, he's been covering a case very closely recently. It's about the disappearances of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, who are 6 and 4 years old. And they were reported missing on May 2nd, 2025. And so Jordan has been covering this case. Of course, this case happened up in Nova Scotia. And Jordan is a Halifax resident and covers all things Canada on Nighttime Podcast. So he's been covering this very closely, and we're having him on today to discuss this case with us and our audience.
All right, and the time is soon approaching here for our virtual fundraiser that is going to benefit our nonprofit that Tim and I are on the board of. It is Private Investigations for the Missing. You can get more information on that organization at investigationsforthemissing.org. This fundraiser is scheduled for June 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be on our Missing YouTube channel at Missing CSM. Please come and join us. We are going to have a list of guests that keep getting better and better every day, and we are going to raise as much money as we can for this wonderful organization that provides investigative services for families who have missing loved ones at no cost to them. And this is again on Wednesday, June 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Missing YouTube channel. See you there.
We will see you there. Okay, please follow us on social media at Missing CSM. Thanks a lot for listening. We're going to break real quick for commercial, and we'll be right back with Jordan Bonaparte. All right, welcome back to the podcast. Jordan Bonaparte of the Nighttime Podcast. Jordan, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. I'm happy to be reconnected with you guys. I'm so glad your shows are back. So glad to hear your voices in my headphones when I'm at the grocery store, and happy to be here with you and your listeners.
We are so delighted to have you back because of those compliments. It's very rare that we get them. So
yeah, it was weird to
back.
get an email telling me to compliment you when we started the show, but whatever.
I'm picturing you in the grocery store just standing there in some aisle, like looking at condiments and listening to our voices and people walking around you wondering what is this guy doing? He's just staring at the ketchup.
They're used to me. I've been listening to your shows for years. I was one of the early adopters to podcasting, as were you, and Missing Maura Murray when it was called that. That was like the first investigative kind of podcast that I listened to. And still now, like 10 or 12 years later, or however long it's been, I still take inspiration to the style and approach you took to that story. And I apply it to stories like the one I've been covering lately, which is the disappearance of Jack and Lily Sullivan, which happened just about an hour from where I'm sitting right now. It happened in Pictou, Nova Scotia, which is a smaller town, and it kind of happened outside of Pictou, which is about an hour from Halifax, which is Nova Scotia's largest province. But yeah, you continue to inspire me, and I'm glad to be here talking about this story with you too.
Well, I'm going to hand back a compliment as well. Your work ethic and your particular approach to how you produce is really amazing. And your listeners they probably do appreciate it, but they need some reinforcement here to know how much work you put into your show as an individual producer. Like Tim and I have each other. You do everything, and that is incredible. And there's not enough of you around. There's a lot of shows out there that are listened to by a lot of people, and they have these production teams. and researchers and scripts, but you invest yourself into every single topic. And I think that's why we just love to have you on, because we're not going to get the Wikipedia. We're going to get
the guy with a laptop in his basement.
Exactly.
Which is a slight step above. No, I appreciate that. I've often thought about putting like a fake run of credits at the end of my episode. Just, thanking my production team and stuff, just to see if maybe it fools people into thinking it's, a professional show. But no, you're right. I think you two, as well as I, one thing we have in common is we're kind of like the old school style of podcaster, which is just kind of like nose to the grindstone, talking to people, pouring through details and, seeing what makes sense and what doesn't. And I've been doing it for years, just like you have. So it's cool to connect with other OG podcast types.
Yeah, and it's going to be 10 years for us in July, but it's a great medium, Jordan. And so you've been following the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, who went missing in early May, or I should say were reported missing on May 2nd, 2025. Now, these are young children, 6 and 4.
Yeah.
I have kids a little bit older than that now, but when they were 6 and 4, I couldn't imagine them getting very far at all.
I feel the same way. And that was one thing that from the very beginning kind of drew me to this case is when 4 and 6 year old siblings are reported missing, of course it's big news immediately because those are young, vulnerable children. And this didn't happen in a city or even what you would refer to as a town. This is a home that is separated from other homes by a considerable distance, forest in between homes, on a highway in a remote area of the province. There's hardly cell phone reception here. And the idea that 2 children at this age in the early morning could have just wandered off into the forest, that seems to be the sort of thing that story ends, around supper time when a search and rescue team finds the 2 kids hungry and scared. But this did not take that approach. The search only ramped up and intensified for days and weeks after they were reported missing. Again, as you said, they were reported missing the morning of Friday, May 2nd. We're recording this now on the 30th of May. So it's just been about a month since these children were reported missing, with no sign or clue or evidence whatsoever, despite one of the most intense searches this province has ever seen. With international media attention to this story from all around the world, I could fairly say that this is one of the highest profile stories to ever come out of Nova Scotia, just because so many details of it don't make sense at all. And again, you have a 4 and a 6-year-old child at the beginning of it. And I think one thing everyone listening can agree on is when 2 children go missing, that's the number one priority to find them, bring them to safety. And despite an intensive effort, that hasn't been able to happen for Jack and Lilly at this point.
Now, you said that they were reported missing on May 2nd, and then you said typically when these stories happen, you kind of expect there to be a resolution by evening time, by, the time that people have had some hours to go out and look for the kids. When that didn't happen, when did it appear on your radar that this was something that you needed to talk about?
I learned about the story that Friday evening. It was all over the news that they were looking for these 2 children. Photos of them were circulating. Some basics of the story of how they actually were found to be missing. I learned about that Friday. Overnight Friday, once the sun is setting and there's missing children thought to have wandered off into the woods. When the sun is setting, that's when you're thinking like, oh man, like they need to find those kids now so they don't spend the night in the woods. When there wasn't an update overnight Friday, Saturday morning, as I woke up, one of the first things I did was pulled up my phone, hoping to see that update that the children were found overnight. When they weren't, from that point on, I think myself and the majority of the people living in Nova Scotia have been following like the minute by minute, hour by hour updates that continue to come through. This story has twisted and turned in so many directions since the children were reported missing that night that it's like to put this conversation in an hour is going to be challenging. There's so much to this at this point.
You've sort of told us a little bit about the area in which they lived. Tell us about their parents. What's going on here?
Yeah, so the best way to start with it is their actual home is, again, a rural It is a small, like, kind of trailer converted into a home in a remote area of Nova Scotia. Within the home, there is 4-year-old Jack, his 6-year-old sibling Lily. There is an 18-month-old baby in the home as well. And the parents in the home are Jack and Lily's biological mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, and their stepfather. His name is Daniel Martel. So again, the way it works is Daniel and Malaya, they have a child together, which is that baby. Malaya has the 2 children from a prior relationship, 4-year-old Jack, his 6-year-old sibling, Lily. So that's kind of the layout of the home. And the way the story works that's been told through the media so far is that on that morning, Friday, May 2nd, the parents, Daniel and Malaya, were kind of snoozing and lounging in bed with their baby. They wake up around 7 or 8 in the morning. They hear Jack and Lily awake in another part of the home, but they just continue to kind of lay in bed with the baby, kind of dozing off in and out of sleep. It's actually around 10 a.m. that they wake up and get out of bed. And it's not because they've been interrupted by Jack and Lily and the noise they're making is waking up the baby. It's instead silence that brought them out of bed. They're realizing around 10 a.m. that they don't hear anything coming from, the living room of the home. They both get out of bed to see where Jack and Lily are. They're not in the house, and there's no sign of where they left, where they went, when they left exactly. So it's always been said sometime between about 7 a.m. and 10 a.m., Jack and Lily somehow left the home. It's been speculated that they left through a patio door. The stepfather, Daniel, he described a patio door to this home as being really quiet, like it easily slides open and shut. And that's something they kind of were concerned about because it wasn't the kind of noise where if you're in the bedroom, you would hear one of the children open it. They suspected maybe the kids went out the sliding patio door and went into the forest behind the home. There was a couple like cabins and sort of play areas they had, not deep in the forest, just kind of where the forest meets the backyard. They kind of suspected the kids went out that way. In the front of the house, the front yard led to basically a highway, and it's been said the kids wouldn't go near the highway, were afraid to cross the street. So it's the majority of the searching has been into the forest behind the house. So when Malaya and Daniel get up at 10 a.m., they don't find the kids in the house. They don't see them in the backyard. Malaya calls 911 to report the children missing. Daniel runs into the woods and begins screaming and checking the main areas around the house for the children and not finding any sight of them. Within no time at all, that's when police respond, search and rescue are assigned to the case, and drone operators are dispatched, flying drones above the forest to try to find these kids. And really from that point on, the only evidence from the search that may connect to the children, it was found at the very beginning. There was a couple footprints, a couple meters from the back door of the house, as well as there was a disturbance found in the mud in the forest behind the house that was thought to maybe resemble a child's footprint, but it has never been confirmed to be that. That was just the only kind of drop of hope that the search and rescue team found that the kids may have went into the woods was this thought to be maybe a child's footprint. And that's really as far as the initial search went. And here we are now, again, almost a month later, and the trail seems to be as cold as it was then, at least as far as what the public knows.
I'm curious what the weather was like around that time.
Yeah, it was this time of year, again, early May in Nova Scotia, in the forest, like where the sun's not hitting the ground. It's going to be muddy and damp and not the kind of place that you would want as a 4 and a 6-year-old to be just kind of roaming around. The clothing description that these kids have is both were thought to be wearing rain boots. Lily was thought to be wearing a backpack, but they weren't dressed for the elements. But fortunately, the weather hasn't been too bad the week after they had disappeared. Overnight, the temperature dropped to about 4 degrees at the lowest, which is above freezing. So a human should be able to survive a night in the woods at that temperature, but it would be certainly a rough night. But the conditions weren't great. And that was a part of the reason why the search initially was so desperate and all hands on deck. Is it was, every night as the sun set, it was thought like, if we don't get these kids tonight, there's going to be no hope that they're going to survive this. But that said, after about, I think there was about 8 days of searching, before the RCMP, which is the Canada's national police force, about 8 days into the search, the RCMP held their first press conference and formally called off the ground search for the children. And it was pretty tragic to hear. And I can't recall really hearing them be this direct in a press conference. But what they said during that 8 days in press conference is that the search will be suspended, and that if we thought the children could be alive in the woods, we'd still be searching. But at this point, we don't believe they'd be able to survive this long. And as such, we're scaling back the search and will instead focus on targeted areas like waterways with divers and the potential to bring in cadaver dogs. But from 8 days in, it was thought, there's not much chance these kids are going to be able to last this long, which I can understand that. And, it makes sense to change the approach to the search. It's just really hard to hear that be admitted. But again, a 4-year-old is not going to last a week in the Canadian forest in early May.
No, and there's a lot already here in your retelling of this story that is not sitting right or sounding right. Just hearing, and I don't want to throw stones at this point, but just the parents laying in bed with their baby for 3 hours. First of all, I don't think you're really supposed to lay in bed with your baby. That's kind of dangerous for the baby. People can roll over if they're asleep, but I know it happens.
Yeah, people do it.
Yeah, but no one got up and got the kids breakfast. Did they were that self-sufficient? They get their own breakfast, or for 3 hours they're playing by themselves?
Yeah, and I will tell you, a lot of people have some serious and reasonable questions about the parenting situation in that house. All I'll say is I know there's been times where I had an awful night's sleep with my baby and I, slept in longer than I should have in the morning. That not making excuses for them, but I think it is unusual to think of a 4 and a 6-year-old to be just left to their own devices. And it's also been said that Lilly and Jack were both undergoing testing related to autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. So I don't know how self-sufficient they were or how much attention was justified for them. But to just leave a 4 and a 6-year-old alone in the morning definitely seems weird. But there's other parts of the story than that will make you kind of make your eyebrows raise a bit. Let me tell you about this. Is one thing we know about this house and this family is that this week, the week leading up to the disappearance of Jack and Lily, didn't seem to be a typical week. And I say that for a few reasons. The children, Jack and Lily, they went to school Monday and Tuesday. They didn't go to school Wednesday. Thursday was an in-service day, so schools were closed. And they weren't going to go to school Friday. The only the only reasoning that the public has learned as to why they weren't in school and those 2 days prior to the disappearance was it was said that Lily had a cough. So it's not that the children were sick. It's just maybe they weren't feeling great, but it's just kind of unusual that in the lead up to their disappearance, they had missed a couple days of school. And I just know myself as a parent, if I have a baby at home to take care of, my 2 older kids, they better be damn sick if they want to get out of school. I'm giving them a Tylenol and sending them to school because it's hard enough to look after a baby. And Tim, I'm sure you can relate to that as well, having gone through that.
Absolutely. And keeping both kids home when one of them has a cough seems overly protective when what we already talked about seems the opposite.
Yeah, I thought the same. Here's where it really gets interesting. So the week is unique. It's unusual that the kids are missing school. It's unusual that the parents sleep in, and all individually, all of those things can kind of be explained away or reasoned away. But what ends up happening is, of course, Friday morning, the children are reported missing. There's a huge search effort throughout the day, Friday into Friday overnight. On Saturday morning, what ends up happening is Malaya, the children's mother, Malaya's family comes to the property from another part of Nova Scotia where Malaya's from. When her family arrives, some kind of domestic thing happens that leads to her family accusing the children's stepfather, Daniel, of being involved or responsible in some way for the children going missing. That leads to her family being ordered off of the property. Malaya, the children's mother, and her family leave the property. Daniel and Malaya break up. the morning after the children are reported missing. And this isn't like rumors or speculation. Like Daniel was on the news saying, she left the property. I'm not exactly sure where she is, and she blocked me on social media. And from that I guess, 24 hours into the search, they've been separated. Daniel, the stepfather, has been speaking to the news regularly. Pretty much everything the public knows about the story has come either from RCMP press releases or from Daniel speaking to the press. Malaya, the children's mother, she's only, as far as I could tell, made one press appearance, and it's a very short clip where she's basically appealing for information and expressing her panic and sorrow. I'll play you what we've heard from Malaya speaking to the press about this, and it's a very short clip. But I know a lot of people listening, they're going to want to hear from Daniel and Malaya to just get a read on them. But here's Malaya speaking to the news.
I'm just staying as hopeful as possible. I want them home. I want to hold them. And I want them home.
That's very short, but that one clip is about all we've ever heard as the public from Malaya. But with the stepfather, Daniel, who is still at the property, it seems almost daily he is appearing on the news speaking about his requests to expand the search, to bring in cadaver dogs. He wants to be tested for drugs. He wants the police to take his phone. He wants a lie detector test. He seems to be very forward and vocal with his belief that these children, from the beginning, he has said, it seems like this may be an abduction because these kids wouldn't just wander off. And he's kind of held that belief publicly since the beginning. He's been requesting borders be closed down between Nova Scotia and the neighboring provinces.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
What is his history? Can you give us a little bit of a background as to his occupation and how long they have been together?
Yeah, there's not a lot known about Daniel and Malaya, the children's mother. But what we know about Daniel, we know more about Daniel, again, because he's been a lot more public about all this, is he worked at a sawmill in the area 1 day a week, so kind of a temporary employment. He is from that area, from Pictou. Malaya wasn't. She was living there to be with him. But he was from the area, working 1 day a week. From all accounts that I could come across, he's described as kind of like a simple, salt of the earth kind of guy. I haven't come across anything untoward about Daniel. And in fact, the only people that I've met that have known him have all had positive things to say about him. Again, it takes a kind of a special kind of person to take on children from your partner's prior relationship. And he seems to really have taken on the role of stepfather. He's taken that role seriously as far as we can tell publicly. But that said, with a story like this, every time he appears on the news and says something, there is an army of people on social media that are trying to psychoanalyze everything he said and go through every part of it. So it's kind of hard to say, but my read on him is he seems to be a sincere guy and genuine guy. And I think if he was responsible for something related to the children's disappearance, he would be an absolute fool to be on the news every single day, it seems, begging for support and for attention to this story. You know, people can pick out the 1 in a million stories like Chris Watts in the States, but that is so rare that someone does that. Daniel, if he had anything to do with this, he would be playing the role of Chris Watts times 1,000, it seems. You want to hear a little bit from Daniel? We just heard from the mother, Malaya. Let's hear from Daniel. This is from one of his very early press appearances. And this is, again, him describing the early moments of the search after they realized the children were left the home. He's going to be describing to the media running into the woods and searching for them. Here it comes.
We were searching. We covered everywhere possible. Even in the first day we did. Even with me running through the woods, I was ahead of the helicopters and ahead of the drones and stuff like that. Screaming as loud as I can. Just until my throat hurt. Running through water that was up to my waist. And as soon as I got back, I wasn't allowed back in the woods until a man dressed in military outfit said I could go back into the woods.
4 days into the search for his missing stepkids, Lilly and Jack Sullivan, Daniel Martel is pleading with the public to keep their eyes peeled. But he has begun to lose hope they are anywhere in the vicinity.
I hate being wet and cold, so they immediately would have came right back into the house. The only 2 prints are right beside the house facing the road, and then That's it.
Martel wants the search to be extended to include provincial borders in case the children were abducted, a reality he says is becoming more and more likely.
Post any officers they can get at the New Brunswick border, PI border, and get them at every airport possible.
Martel confirmed that when the two children went missing from the home behind me, Lily was wearing a pink shirt and pink rain boots. She was also carrying a white backpack with strawberries on it. Martel says although he didn't see Jack that morning, he is believed to be wearing a brown shirt, brown pants with a pull-up diaper on underneath, and blue rain boots with dinosaurs on them. He also refuted the claim that the two children are nonverbal, saying while they are on the autism spectrum, they are quite trusting and say hi to everyone. According to Martel, his side of the family are currently the only ones at ground zero after Lily and Jack's mother left the county Saturday. But still, he remains, begging anyone with answers to come forward and bring his children home safe.
Anybody who has any information or you think you've seen something or hear something or any messages from friends about hearing something, just contact your local police services. Anything, guys. Anything.
Yeah, so that's Daniel speaking to the news just days later. And like, I'm no expert, but when I hear him, that sounds sincere to me.
Yeah, it does sound sincere. He breaks up there towards the end of each statement. His voice is wavering and he's on the verge of tears there. And one thing that stood out to me is how knowledgeable he is with the protocol of shutting down and certain borders and calling out airlines to, that includes airlines and shutting down, be on the lookout here. Did he have any background in law enforcement at all, or this is just he's throwing everything at the wall?
Yeah, that's what it seems to be. But in this part of the country, in Nova Scotia, there's just a couple ways off. There's only a couple ways out of Nova Scotia. So what he's naming is the routes off of Nova Scotia into other provinces. So let's say if there was an Amber Alert, I know you have that in the States as well. An Amber Alert is something that's done when there's proof a child was abducted and there's identifying information about the abductor, such as like a make and model of a vehicle or something they can look for. When an Amber Alert is issued on a case, things can happen, like borders can be shut down and planes can stop and all this stuff. It's in the early days of this, they were requesting an Amber Alert, but this case wouldn't qualify because there wasn't evidence of an abduction, and of course there was no identifying information about an abductor's vehicle. So since these children were reported missing, the RCMP, the police, law enforcement, have largely been talking about it publicly as if the children wandered off, and it's seemingly searching as if it was a ground search for children who wandered off into the woods. But a lot of the public discussion and even a lot of Daniel's statements seem to move more towards there was an abduction or there was some type of foul play. Early on, there was a lot of calls for an Amber Alert that never came. There were public alerts, like when your phone will buzz and it'll tell everybody in the area that, there's these missing vulnerable children. That happened, but there was never an Amber Alert that would shut down the borders.
Yeah, an abduction seems like that would be very rare and be quite surprising, seeing that the kids were either in the house or probably in the backyard. My question is, where is the biological father?
That's been a bit of a mystery. I have not been able to identify who he is, but people within the know either say he's in prison or recently got out of prison. So there's a bit of a question mark there, but the consensus is that he was never in the children's life from the beginning. So I think just when you're hearing that Daniel's a stepfather, it makes you say, who is the biological father? He hasn't been revealed publicly or discussed publicly, aside from the question, who is he? And what is his relationship with Malaya or the children? But that all said, you just talked about like an abduction could be rare. Abductions are rare in Canada and in the United States. Stranger abductions, even more so, are incredibly rare. I think it's something like 85, 90% of abductions of children are children being abducted by their family members, generally parents or very close family, account for about 90% of the abductions. The other abductions, stranger abductions, when someone, that grabs a kid that they don't know or they have no connection to, It's incredibly rare, and it's almost exclusively in metropolitan areas like cities, like in inner city playground, some kid gets grabbed by someone suffering mental illness, something of that nature. It would be highly unlikely that a stranger was in a remote part of Nova Scotia and managed to pick a home that has these two children whose parents or caregivers are sleeping in. It would be like the lightning strike. It'd be like lightning striking someone who just got hit by lightning the day prior. It would be so incredibly statistically anomalous. But that said, it's not impossible.
Right. But what makes it even more anomalous and rare, I think, is the fact that there are two kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Exactly.
so one abductor, one stranger just grabbed them both, without a scene, without screaming, without anything. I can't believe it. It didn't happen.
I feel the same way. It seems like a stranger abduction should be out of the question. But again, it's not impossible, but it's just one thing I'm confident in saying is given the amount of searching that happened and the extent of the searching that happened around the home, they expanded the search area to about 5 square kilometers, which is an incredible distance for a 4-year-old to walk on streets, let alone through thick forest. And when you think about this forest, it's important to note that just a year ago, Nova Scotia was hit by a hurricane. So this forest in this area would be filled with downed, dead pine trees. To walk through it, you would be clawing your way through twigs and sticks, up and down hills, through boggy swamps and water. And the search efforts were so intense that I don't think there's any possibility that two children are in the woods. Maybe if one of them was in the woods and they fell in an old well or fell down a crevice or something, the drones and the searchers may not find them. But for two kids to completely disappear without leaving a boot behind or dropping her backpack within a 5-kilometer radius seems unusual. But it's going to get a bit puzzling because here's the thing. There was an 8-day search from the time they were reported missing up until the police made that press conference saying, we don't believe the children are alive anymore. We're scaling back the search. There was this incredible search. Several days passed, and then unexpectedly, the RCMP issued a press release saying the search is back on. Over the Victoria Day long weekend, we're full force going back in that area and researching for any sign that the kids are out there. So when they did this second large-scale search, which included over 100 search and rescue volunteers in the forest, helicopters, drones again, dogs again, a lot of people thought like the police must be convinced that they're up there if they did this second search. But after, I think it was about 4 days, the second search was called off as well, with no evidence being found as far as we can tell. So it's almost like the searchers like crossed their T's and dotted their I's with a second large scale search, not finding anything. But what that told me, like reading between the lines, I can't imagine the police being able to justify the second search if they really didn't think it was possible.
Can you tell us about the last time anyone saw Lilly and Jack outside of the parents and the stepfather?
That's a good question. And that's kind of a breaking development on this whole thing, a development that just came yesterday. So where Jack and Lilly missed like the 3 days of school prior to being reported missing, that led a lot of people to think like, when did they actually go missing? Could there be more to this story? Could something have happened earlier? There was a lot of like armchair detective type people online saying, I'm sure that something happened Tuesday night and, the parents are covering it up. So there's always been this question of when they were seen by someone other than their mother and stepfather. The RCMP issued a press release just yesterday saying that we have confirmed that the children were seen by someone outside of their family on May the 1st, on Thursday afternoon. They didn't give details about it other than to say this was the last time they were seen by someone other than their family. And when they were seen, they were with their immediate family on Thursday, May 1st. So the kids were at least okay the day before they went missing, but we don't know the context of that sighting or where they were. They just, that's the fact they know. But it gets interesting. With that point, there's another side of this that gets interesting. One thing that we do know, and of course the RCMP investigating this haven't shown the deck of cards they're playing with. But a woman came forward who lives in a neighboring community, not even in the area where the children went missing. She's about an 8-kilometer drive. So about a 20-minute drive from where the kids were reported missing from. And she came forward and spoke to the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, or our national news company. She came forward and said, the police were at my house, the major crimes unit, and they were requesting access to my security cameras. They knocked on my door and I have trail cameras on my property and security cameras. They wanted access to all of it, and I gave it to them. And what was interesting about it is, for one, the distance. This is 8 kilometers away from where the children went missing, so it would be outside of the search area. And where it got extra interesting is what she had told the CBC is that the police didn't only want footage from the day the children were reported missing and the days that followed. They wanted the footage to start several days prior. So I think it was like 5 days before the kids went missing. They wanted all the footage from that point forward. So a lot of people scratch their heads with that. Like, why the heck would they want that? If they're investigating it as if on May 2nd, these children walked away, what could video from 8 kilometers away 3 days prior to that, what relevance could that possibly have? It gets a little weirder. One last step before we talk about this is when the press release was issued yesterday talking about the children being seen the day prior to being reported missing, the police also added a detail at the end of that press release saying, we want anyone in the area who has dash cam footage or any kind of security footage, anyone in that area, we want your footage starting, I guess it was like 3 days before the disappearance up to today, anything you have. So what we know about the investigation, it's left to speculate what this could mean, but it seems that there is importance for the days leading up to that. And what that could be, I don't know.
And that's really impressive to hear all that, because that's kind of rare when we talk about missing persons. A lot of the times we're asking the question, has anyone requested ring camera footage? Has anyone requested footage from traffic stops and things like that? But to hear that they're being proactive like that is really a very reassuring piece of information.
Yeah, well, it's a different world. Like with now, so many people have dash cams, but also so many people have like the video doorbells. Like I know at my house, I have a video doorbell system where anytime there's motion outside of my house, it sends me like a 20-second clip or whatever. A lot of people's doorbells face the street, so they get all these alerts of cars driving past. So all it can take is a couple homes in this area that have footage of every car that drove past, and it really changes an investigation. And it seems like they may have something like this in this case. One look we got into the investigation is I had mentioned earlier on in our talk that where the children went missing from, cell phone reception was really spotty and poor. What the people searching for the kids did on that day, on May 2nd during the search, is rather than using their digital walkie-talkie type things to organize their search, they went on a more traditional radio system that is used by search and rescue and firefighters in the area. But it's not encrypted, so the public has access to it. So someone got access and published the entire recording of the emergency dispatchers during the first day of searching for Jack and Lily. So you get to hear the dispatcher talking to the police, talking to search and rescue, organizing resources, as well as you hear dispatch communicating 911 calls they're receiving with people on the ground searching. And one of the calls that came in was a man who lived in the area saying he called the police and said, if you need information on any vehicles that pass by today, I should be able to provide you all with all that. Here's my number, have them give me a call. We don't really know what he gave them, but it would be reasonable to think it's something like what I just said. Maybe he had a video doorbell or something and was able to provide that to the police. But where the kid's home is an isolated house on one stretch of road, anyone coming or going from there would have, if it's by car, would have had to come, down that main strip. So it does narrow down the investigation a little bit. And it seems like vehicles may play a role in the police theory, given that they're so desperate to get access to dash cam footage in the days leading up to the children's disappearance.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good question to ask and to try to find answers to, like, what were the parents doing when the kids were out of school before they were reported missing? Like, what was going on in the house during those days? You mentioned this neighbor 8 kilometers away. Makes me wonder if they got some kind of tip over by her, or what else is, like, what's going on in her backyard? Is that just all like forest back there? Were people traipsing through there? Yeah, what's going on back there?
It's interesting. And you said this neighbor. It's important to say this isn't a neighbor. This is another community. It even has a different place name. It would be a 5-kilometer distance in a straight line. If you walked from where the children disappeared to this house in a straight line as the crow flies, it'd be 5 kilometers. To get there by vehicle, the way the roads wind, be about 8 kilometers. The only connection between the children's property in this house, and it was like a targeted request. It's not like they knocked on every home within an 8-kilometer radius of the children's home. They went specifically to this house. The only connection there seems to be is there's power lines, and like underneath power lines, they kind of clear out the forest a little bit. There's a stretch of power lines that goes through near this woman's property to the area where the children lived. So there was a kind of a pathway there. And then there was also like a dirt gravel road that you could take that would get you towards the children's home. So I'm guessing a part of the police theory is that these, either the power lines and the cleared area under the power lines, or this dirt road may be connected in some way to the children's disappearance. That's the only thing that could make sense.
And that dirt road was drivable?
Drivable, especially by like ATV and dirt bike, which a lot of people are interested in because the children's stepfather, Daniel, was involved in, like, I think he has like several ATVs, but that wouldn't be uncommon in this area. It's, if you live in rural Nova Scotia, just like if you lived in rural Massachusetts or whatnot, it's, dirt bikes and stuff are a thing. But it could be driven by car as well. It just wouldn't be an easy drive. When news broke that the RCMP had requested video footage from this home, CBC reporters did the drive in a car. And I think they said it took them about 25 minutes, and it was a tough drive. So it's not the kind of thing you'd want to take your car in. But in SUV, it probably wouldn't be much trouble.
They did that drive on the dirt road?
That's right.
Interesting. Okay.
But I think, like, for me, what's interesting about it is just that they want footage in the days prior to the disappearance. If this was truly being investigated as if the kids wandered off, that's the only, the day of of them being reported missing and after would be the only things that make sense. The police also went a bit further, as they wanted, when they got this footage from her property, there were several other homes in the area that they asked for the same thing, any video footage from your property, but they wanted a list of vehicles. What vehicles do you own? Which vehicles visited your home? So it seems like they're also trying to narrow down who was coming and going from this area 8 kilometers away. So it's what's clear to me, although we don't know exactly what the theory is or what they're working on, it seems like investigators have some kind of theory that they're working on and are working towards it. And because of that, I think this case, it's been at a boiling point since the very beginning, because it's 2 children, and like I said, it's when kids go missing, everything else takes second priority. It's been at a boiling point since the beginning, but it seems like now the police are getting close to something.
Now, what about any highway system that's running through that area? Is there any chance that Lilly and Jack made it to some major roadway, some interstate or something like that, some highway that a transient person or a truck driver could have stopped?
Not really, because where they went missing, it's far enough away from any large areas or any kind of major interstates or whatnot where people would be traveling through. They would have had such a great distance to travel to get somewhere like that. By the time they made that walk, this case would have been the talk of Nova Scotia. If there were tips coming in all across the province of children in rain boots, or I saw people on Facebook. They were I think it was like 3 hours away from where these kids went missing, they saw a rain boot left alone at a playground in this community, completely detached on the other side of the province. And they posted photos online like, could this be Jack or Lily's rain boot? I saw a random rain boot in this playground. And people in the comments are saying, you should call the RCMP right away and let them know about this. So this is the kind of thing that if these children walked out of the woods and came upon someone, they would have known all about Jack and Lily.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Really interesting stuff about the other area, too. I definitely wonder what led them to that area. I wonder if it's just those power lines and maybe they're doing their due diligence. Maybe the kids could have walked along that trail under those power lines because it's less woodsy, and maybe they could have made it that far, but highly unlikely.
What the RCMP have said is that they've received something like 150 tips related to the disappearance, and they had a list of about, they didn't give the list, but they said there was like 30 something people that they wanted to interview related to the investigation of this disappearance. A part of my thought is maybe they're just taking every interview with someone close to the children, be it parents, family, teachers, whoever, and they're just confirming every detail of it. And maybe a part of someone's story is that I traveled through there, 2 days before, and they're just trying to find someone lying. Like it could just be a part of this crossing T's and dotting I's of everybody's statement. So that's a part of it, but it just what doesn't sit right with me is that they want footage from the days before the disappearance. And to me, that just signals that this investigation is more than the search for children who wandered away.
You had said that the last time anyone had seen them was sort of breaking news. Is there any other up to the minute type news that you have right now, or is that pretty much the latest thing?
It seems like every couple days something new comes out that really, really captures everyone's attention. The clarification to the timeline of when the children were reported missing, that just came out yesterday. That's the big news. Several days before that is when we learned that the RCMP were requesting video footage from this other community about 8 kilometers away. That really changed a lot of people's opinion on the investigation, because a big question has been, is it truly children wandered away investigation, or is there something more to that? All signs seem to be pointing towards this as being investigated as something criminal or more to the story than the children walking away. But we're now really, the public is just waiting on more information, which probably isn't going to come from the RCMP, as they're not going to show their cards as to what they're working with, especially at this point. But it seems like they're getting close. As far as other major breaking news, there really hasn't been much. And that's, I think, a part of the frustration a lot of people have with this case is people are so invested in it, and there's just so little that's coming out. And that leads, of course, as you both know very well, it leads to a lot of toxic nonsense pouring out online, a lot of accusations bordering on cyber stalking and harassment of the parents and family members of being involved. There's a lot of psychics. There's a lot of fake news, like people making just bordering on fan fiction videos where they're describing these details and rumors that just don't even exist. So there's a lot of problematic stuff popping up online about this case, but that is simply just, in the absence of fact, that void gets filled by, random nonsense. And there's a lot of that playing out. It's what I've tried to do is I've been doing weekly episodes. Once a week, I do an episode talking about all the developments and updates of the week and reviewing kind of major news reports about the case as well. And I've been really trying to just stick with the facts and debunk any nonsense that I see kind of getting mixed in with the discourse. Like one example of something that I really had a problem with is early on after the disappearance of the children, there was this rumor circulating that on Thursday night, the night before the disappearance of the children, there was a major party at the house. That there were cars lined up and down the street, all in the driveway. It was full of cars. There was this huge party. which led to all these theories about maybe during the party someone scooped up the kids, or maybe the kids got into drugs at the party and the parents wanted to hide it. But I could not find like any information on why are people talking about this party? Where did this idea of a party come from? So I went on a bit of a mission, and I ended up finding the source of the party rumor. And it turned out to be an anonymous poster, an anonymous person in a Facebook group devoted to this case, shared a screenshot that they claimed was of a conversation they had with a neighbor of the children. And the screenshot showed the series of messages. And ultimately, what the alleged neighbor said is, I live I think they said 500 feet from the children, and there is no home within that distance. And they said, I drove by there recently. I don't know if it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, but there was a bunch of cars on the road. I'm not sure what that was all about. And that was like as far as it went, but somehow people took this probably fake message as being and they took the detail of like cars on the road on Tuesday or Thursday to cars on the road and in the driveway Thursday night, and it was a huge party. And so it was just utter nonsense, and there's been so much of that. So I try to, in my episodes, focus just on the facts. And when I see something catching steam, like this idea of this party, I try to poo-poo it.
What are the odds that the stepfather, Daniel, actually gives DNA, takes a lie detector test, a polygraph? Has he already done that? Did I miss that part?
We don't know for sure. What we know is that he's requested a polygraph, but polygraphs, they're talked about way more often than they're actually done. In Canada, they're inadmissible in court. So it's pointless for the most part for the RCMP or any law enforcement in Canada to use them. Often a polygraph is used almost to call someone's bluff. Like if I'm interviewing, if I want to talk to Tim about something he's uncomfortable with, maybe I'll raise the stakes and raise the temperature a little bit by being like, and Tim, we're going to do it on a polygraph. And that's not because I care about the results of the polygraph. I just want to get him off guard by talking about this, what's seen by many to be pseudoscience of a polygraph test. So he's requested a polygraph. Whether or not it happened, we don't know for sure yet. I'm sure he will tell the media when it has. But what we do know has happened is that he has given his cell phone and his internet modem, like his router, which will show any devices that connected to the home network. He's at least publicly stated that he's given all of that to investigators. And I think, in this day and age, when a crime's committed, it's often the digital forensic evidence that shows what's actually happening in a home. So I'm hoping that'll reveal something. But at least the fact that he's willing to give all of this stuff up. If there was this crazy conspiracy to hide a crime or something between Daniel and the children's mother, it'd be hard to organize all that without your cell phones and your internet modem revealing the horrible truth of your lie.
Yes, I agree. If they're searching for, disposal sites or something like that, yeah, you're gonna probably find that, and that's gonna be really obvious.
Yeah, or even just something like, oh, it's odd that you turned off location services and the GPS on your phone for 4 hours the night before this. Like just some kind of anomaly like that. I think it's hard to commit a crime in this day and age if you have a cell phone.
Yeah. Now, does that home have any history of drug or alcohol abuse or use that you're aware of?
No, not that I'm aware of. If you read rumors online, you'll hear all sorts of craziness, but I haven't seen any evidence of any kind of foul behavior at the home or any police activity. It seems like when you look at photos of it, it is certainly a rundown house, but it's a rundown house with a lot of like just like kind of trash in the yard is how I describe it. It has like a large fence around the back of the trailer that it looks like the fence is made of like recycled material, like pallets and stuff. Like it's a pretty like homely looking area. There's like tarps on the roof because of probably leaks and stuff. It's not a well-kept property by the looks of it, the appearance of it. But that said, if given the state of our economy, if you go around rural Nova Scotia or rural any state or province, you're going to see properties like this fairly common. Malaya was a stay-at-home mom. Daniel, the stepfather, worked 1 day a week at a sawmill. So this certainly wasn't a family that had a lot of financial means. And the home shows that.
Did their relationship seem strained because of that? Was there any reports of that from family members saying that they were, they had additional stress because of financial difficulty?
Yeah, it's I haven't seen specific reports. When you look at the Facebook history, like photos of them together, they look to be a happy blended family. But of course, you only post your good photos, of course. But there doesn't seem to be much family coming out speaking at all. This case became so high profile so quick that so many of the people connected to it just retreated. Malaya shut down. She allegedly blocked Daniel on Facebook. She seems to have shut down her Facebook account. And I can only imagine that because when it was open, she was probably getting flooded with messages from people around the world accusing her of killing her kids. And same with Daniel. So it's, the online discourse is just absolutely wild in this case. And much like it is in any high profile case.
Definitely curious what Malaya's conversations are like with her family, though. Very interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people question her leaving. Like a lot of people will say things like, if my kids were missing, I'd be in the woods myself, or I'd be standing there, talking to the search and rescue team. I try to see both sides of that. For one, what could she really do? Like a mother or anyone, it's when an organized search and rescue team is in the woods doing a grid search, they're not going to let a panicked mom run around, trample over the scene. They're going to say, just get out of here. We'll communicate with you and we'll keep you up to date of everything, but you're not going to help by being out in the woods with us as we're doing this. So I can imagine a conversation somewhat like that, where they said, it's fine for you to go be with your parents, look after your baby and look after yourself, and we'll handle things here. But that said, I feel like if I was in that position, I'd be like, and I thought my kids were in the woods, I can't imagine leaving.
But she left right after her family accused her husband of having something to do with their disappearances. And she left with the people who made that accusation.
Yeah. So it is interesting. And I would really like to know what the exact accusations were, what the context of this whole dispute was. Earlier, Lance, you had asked how long they had been together. This was the day after the disappearance, was the end of a 2-year relationship. They'd been living together for about 2 years. They had I think 18-month-old baby together. So for that relationship to break down the day after Jack and Lily went missing is odd timing. Of course, a relationship will be challenged to the max when you're dealing with 2 missing children. But I can't help but feel like I'd be able to be like, I hate you now, but we got to stick together and deal with this because we're in the middle of something here. Like, now's not the time to break up.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking about the picturesque moment that was presented with them laying in bed and sort of dozing in and out with their beautiful 18-month-old baby. Like, that relationship there, if they were having problems leading up to that, I don't think that they're like lounging in bed and sort of, dozing in and out with their 18-month-old baby. It sounds like they were happy in that moment. But I keep thinking about the Ramseys over here, the JonBenét Ramsey case, where she was missing for a very short period of time, but found in the home, found murdered. And John and Patsy stayed together. The victim's parents, JonBenét's parents, stayed together during all of this and always professed their innocence so strongly. So that's kind of what was going through my head as well. And what you said, like, really? Like, even if they were having problems over the past year or 9 months or something, now's not the time to do this. Now's not the time to break up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and especially like I'm blocking him on social media and we're done with each other. It just seems like unnecessary. But of course, we don't know exactly what the accusations were and what was said. But I feel like I'd be pretty forgiving to someone who said some awful things to me in the heat of a moment as hot as the children are missing.
Yeah, given the circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. But that all said, it's like, a lot of people following this case have serious questions about both parents. And I get that. But at the same time, it's like, I think I want to believe the parents in this case without any evidence that they were involved in something. I feel like people need to just like support them and try to get to the bottom of this. But it's like it's hard because it's every aspect of the story. It just seems so weird and illogical. And where we don't know what the information the RCMP are going on, what they've learned for their interview from their interviews, why they want information about vehicles in the area the days before the disappearance. I'm sure they've had many interviews with both Daniel and Malaya and grandparents and social workers and teachers. They have a much clearer photo, a much clearer image of these children's lives. So, I think it would be fascinating to know what the RCMP think at this point, but we're not going to know until the big development comes. And that's going to be the children were found or someone was arrested. And yeah, I can't imagine they're not close. This is such a high profile case that it would affect the image of the RCMP to not be able to solve this one. So I'm sure they're putting all hands on deck. Another thing that's adding additional pressure is the premier of Nova Scotia, the political leader of Nova Scotia. His home riding is Pictou, which is the community that these children lived in. So not only is it pressure on the RCMP, there's political pressure because the premier, the leader of our province, is from this area as well. So he's connected to it. The news media from across the province, across the country, and international news is following this case. So it's something that if this can be solved, it's going to be solved. And I'm actually surprised it's gone on this long. A lot of people are critical of the RCMP for not cracking this case immediately and not being, not revealing what information they're going off of. But that's not how these things work. A rushed investigation is one that has charges dropped or downgraded and a criminal gets off. I'm sure they're not idiots. They're doing this right.
Well, I would say they followed the word of the parents first and investigated it like they wandered off. And then when they didn't find the kids in the woods in the 8 days after they were reported missing, I think they're probably right that they aren't in those woods and probably hadn't been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then they got to go off of every other idea and double check every detail in everybody's statements, whether it's the parents or grandparents or, anybody associated with this. It's frightening.
Yeah, something about the description of how they went missing is not sitting right with me, and I don't believe it. I don't know where the lies are coming. I don't know what fingers I'm pointing at who, but it doesn't sound realistic.
I've thought the same, but just to talk it out, if that story about that morning wasn't true, both the children's stepfather Daniel and mother Malaya, that was their story. So if that isn't true, they're both telling a dishonest story. So are they protecting themselves or someone else? And if they broke up the next day, why haven't they turned on each other if they were both protecting someone else? Like it just seems like so many cases go cold and eventually warm up when some relationship breaks down and someone is no longer loyal to the other person. That this all happened like in a pressure cooker. So I'm very surprised that something hasn't happened if that story isn't true, which makes me think maybe it is.
Yeah, I think Malaya definitely could have turned on her husband, and we wouldn't know about it right now if she didn't know where the kids were or wasn't willing to help the police find them.
Yeah, and from Daniel, the stepfather's point of view, you heard it in the clip we played there. He claims like she left. It's me and my family out here searching for these kids that aren't even his biological children. Why would he be on the news appealing for help when she's blocked him on Facebook? If he thought if he knew she had something to do with it, like why would he be protecting her? Why would she be protecting him?
Are you hypothesizing that perhaps she did turn on him and the police intervened, or she went to the police and this is what she was told by police to do? Get out of there. Like, we'll put you in a safe spot and block him from social media so he doesn't influence you. Is that what we're kind of rolling around here?
I don't know. It's like, for me, everything is on the table, but nothing makes sense. Like that doesn't, like, I guess it's possible, but there's so little we know about what's happening behind the scenes that we're kind of left taking any detail and just seeing where it fits. And I could see how that could line up to being possible, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, because they probably would have moved in a little bit sooner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right? If she had all of this evidence mounted against him that caused them to say, all right, we're taking you in, block him from social media. Like, what are they waiting on at that point?
Yeah, that sounds a lot like an open and shut case that doesn't take. Let's
Yeah,
just let him go
get
on the
him. Yeah.
news every day for the next month. Also, maybe their story is true. They were sleeping and someone unconnected to them snatched up the kids, some other family member, some neighbor, some psycho who was passing through. There's all of these options. And I just keep going back to what relevance do vehicles moving around the days before the children's disappearance play into this? Is there a part of the theory that someone was staking out the house, someone was roaming around there, peeking in windows kind of thing? Like, I don't know what relevance the days before the disappearance play in if Daniel and Malaya were responsible. If the children were seen on Thursday, May 1st, the day before the disappearance, then nothing before then would involve like hiding bodies and stuff. Like it seems like they're looking for someone hanging around there that shouldn't be there. When you look at cases of, parents doing horrible things to the children, it's usually the sudden thing that they snapped and did this. I can't imagine it's, 5 days before we do it, let's dig the hole and we'll have all the stuff there ready. I get it's possible, but it just seems wouldn't fit the pattern.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying about like a sudden reaction and then covering up or something like that. We do hear of that kind of thing happening, but I don't know. 2 kids, doing, having that kind of reaction and hurting 2 kids. I don't know. Something's not adding up here.
Something certainly isn't adding up, but it's a story that's continuing to unfold. And I think that's why so many people are so closely watching this. I would think this is probably one of the highest profile missing children cases in the world at this point. It's the amount of attention it's getting. And that's because it's such a mystery. And there's these little breadcrumbs that get dropped every day to stimulate the discussion. And like, I've been watching it closely, and I'm sure it's, I think we're weeks, if not days, away from an answer to this.
Oh, okay. So you're that optimistic about that?
Yeah. I think they've done the search to the point that I think they can rule out that the kids are in the woods. So I think now they're just double checking everybody's statements, and they're probably seeing who's telling the truth and who isn't. And, once they know that, I think that the picture will emerge pretty quick.
All right. Well, you have to rejoin us if that happens. You have to shoot us a message. Let us know if there's any update that hits your news wire first. And yeah, I would love to talk to you more about it.
Certainly.
All right. Thanks a lot for joining us here today, Jordan. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime. I'm always happy to come back on Missing or Crawlspace, two of the best podcasts. And as I said from the beginning, great to be friends with you guys. You've inspired me since the beginning and continue to.